Good morning. I'm Rod Hutchings, and welcome to today's panel. The world of work is evolving as we know it. The modern office will never be the same. We've transitioned from an office-centric to a remote work virtual teams. We're in an era where our homes have become our boardrooms, our kitchen tables, our cubicles, and our digital platforms, our water coolers. The pandemic didn't just change the way we worked, it redefined how we perceive productivity, collaboration, and work-life balance. So today, I'm really looking forward to our conversation about remote work and how we can make that better. As we go through the conversation with our panelists, we'd love to hear from the people who are attending live as well. You can leave comments in the chat and we'll try and incorporate that into the panel. But without further ado, let's dive into the discussion and bring forward the panelists, please. Wow, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice full panelists.
Hello.
All right, so to start the morning, or maybe if we can introduce ourselves, we'll go around starting from John and just introduce yourself, your name, maybe where you're from, what interests you in remote work. Would be great.
Okay.
So thanks, John.
Yeah. All right. Here goes. And I believe, just as a check, it's pre-nighttime for you. So good morning from San Francisco. My name is John. I've been working in physically distributed teams my entire career. I just stumbled into it that way in the first job and thought it was normal. I've been running it, supervising teams and running different operations for 17 years and running workshops and stuff like that for 10. Incubators, MBAs, written a book twice, working on a third edition, by the way. And I've been advising a bunch of state and federal government clients as well as private industry. And I'll pass to
Richard.
Excellent.
Richard.
Good morning. Richard Bertner. I'm the Senior Director of Compensation with Edward Jones. I live, I think Alina in the chat is in Austin, Texas. I'm also in Austin, Texas. The kind of relevance for me in terms of the kind of virtual perspective is my career has been primarily working in a virtual environment for the firms that I've worked at in the years, American Express, Santander, Deco Group, and even here with Edward Jones as well. So very relevant for me as I've done it for many, many years. So also hoping to share some nuggets of information with not only amongst my peers here on the panel, but also those participating in the call. So thank you.
Thanks, Richard, and welcome, Charmaine.
Hey everyone, I am Charmaine. I am the founder and CEO of Chapter 2 LLC, which is a people-first organizational and leadership development consultancy. And much like John and Richard have shared, my career, I always worked in these type of environments where teams were distributed, always worked for global companies. So I very much found it normal that you would be on a screen talking to people or in a conference room. And that's one of the things that interested me in this topic, in addition to the fact that I really believe that leaning with or being open to remote work is about inclusivity.
Cool. I guess I'm next if we're going up and around. So my name's Susie. I'm based in Canada. So hello, everybody. Anyone in Canada or around, and a good middle of the evening Rod is my favorite because he's probably like 3 a.m. or something.
2 a.m.
2 a.m. in Australia. So that's amazing. Thank you for doing this. So yeah, I'm the same. Like I basically had a career as well that was very global, working in different capacities. So managing teams across time zones and around the world, like a lot of the folks here. So excited actually to talk about it with everyone who's been doing it for a while and to see like where we can get to in terms of like just giving like the best practices for today, like how does it apply to what's going on right now. So nice to meet everyone and see you today. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Susie. Last but not least.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Oh, you just muted yourself.
Yeah. Cannot hear you.
The joys of virtual.
Virtual. Yeah, this is a good introduction to it.
First learning.
Am I audible now?
That's it. Yes.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Mine. I'm based in Istanbul, Turkey. So it's not 2 a.m. yet, but it's about to,
Yeah.
I'm about to finish my day, 6 p.m. here. And it's great to be on the panel. I've been in the remote workspace for since 2012, and I have been talking about being a keynote and helping companies to transition to remote. It wasn't as relevant before the pandemic. After the pandemic, everyone started talking about it as it became a mandatory thing for most of the people. And now it has become popular for the back to the office summons by some of the companies. So I'm sure today is going to be a fun conversation about the ups and downs and what we expect in the future. So cannot wait to kick off the conversation.
Thank you, Minnie. And maybe we'll start on a bit of that. So I guess what are the key elements, do we think, of a successful virtual team? And how has your perspective changed on that since the pandemic? So, again, a number of us may have been working in virtual teams previously. I'm just curious on what we think of what's changed since the pandemic. Anyone?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Susie.
No, I was going to say, I think the big change with like virtual is like, we actually have a panel here. It sounds like people who have been doing the distributed team time zone change thing for many years, right? Like, yeah. And you grow up and it would be like a certain level of employee, I would say like director type of, or plus, or in certain specific roles that were working in this distributed environment and highly remote. So they were trusted, they were trained, there was a level of just, commonality between the people that would do this globally and what the expectations were. And I think what's happened now since the pandemic is then the floodgates open to everyone, right? So like, I know when I was head of HR for a startup when we did this, and it was just like, well, and then the work from anywhere came about, right? Like, so now we're going to have someone who's been with us for 2 weeks as a, entry level employee. They want to work from like Thailand. Well, it's like, wait a minute. Like, do they know they shouldn't work in a cafe? Like, do they know how to safeguard their computer? Like, just all of these types of little things. And, from an employee perspective, they're like, of course I do. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can trust me. Like, I'm going to do this. Everybody has good intentions and is an adult, right? But I think what happened is that like, without the practice, it's just like, there's been no guidelines. There hasn't been training. We kind of shifted from like a lift and dump, if you will, like not even a lift and shift, to going like to this distributed team. It's just kind of like, we went from A to B, and then there's people like that are on here that are like, yep, this is like common day, like whatever. And then everyone else is like, yep, I can do this. No problem. It's easy. I can do, I have my computer with me. But I think that's where it's kind of like why this is a discussion, because there has been no training, and you have to be very deliberate when you're doing things remotely around goals, communications, right? Mm-hmm. Expectations of every role is different, right? So it's just leveling up everyone versus just having that small sphere of the world that's been playing that game for a while.
Yeah, maybe just add into what kind of Susie was saying is I think about the technology play. Pre-pandemic, everything was via conference call, right? So you didn't have that connection with the other individual or individuals on the other end of the call. I think having Teams, Zoom, et cetera, has kind of just accelerated that connection. I think, Susie, as you mentioned, and Charmaine as well, just being intentional, right? In terms of the engagement with the individuals. I know some people have talked about kind of the burnout, right? Of having to be on camera for 8-10 hours a day on Zoom or Teams calls. But I think it's also, again, as you mentioned, just having that awareness of not everybody wants to be on camera, but it has changed. Again, the technology has kind of prompted us to be able to have that connection where it was, the adage was, well, you need to be in the office to be face-to-face, right? And we're face-to-face right now, right? So I think it's, again, the technology continues to evolve, but having that intentionality in terms of inclusivity, I think is huge as well, because again, not everybody is kind of adapting to the technology and to this work environment that maybe some of us that have been accustomed to.
Yeah, I'm gonna, if I may. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Please.
On the next.
No, please go on. I'll add just at the end.
Okay, for sure. I want to pick up on what Susie said. This whole like lift and dump or lift and shift thing. It's like, oh, look, these other people have been doing this for a long time. It can't be that hard. Oh, big emergency. So everyone shifts and tries to mimic, and there's all sorts of drama. And then, oh, COVID is over. And so now everyone's like, oh, why don't we just keep doing this? Oh, I can work from where. And they miss the fact that doing this well over time has got all these careful, like operational steps. Like, how do you deal with laptops? How do you deal like replacement repairs, issuing new ones to new hires, returning for people who leave, things like very tactical things like that. Distributed companies have that stuff heavily dialed down, and you can't just sort of waltz into it and think that it magically happens behind the scenes. It took planning. And other examples are things like, oh, I want to go work out of some location in the world. Actually, legally, you're not allowed for this reason or for that reason. Like whether you could move to another place in a different country and it would be allowed. And that's not about a corporate choice. It's a national law. So like there's things like this where you have to have people be aware of all the complexities. You can't just lift and dump. I love that phrase, Susie. So anyway. Sorry.
No, that's. I mean, you raised some really good points there, John. And I mean, certainly, I'm from Australia, Melbourne, Australia, and we within each state we've got different labor laws, different insurances, all those little elements. So people do perceive they can just move from state to state, and it's not that straightforward to make sure that the companies are compliant. So you really bring up some good points there. Yeah. Thanks.
So I want to bring in a different perspective here, because this has been my life since 2012, and I've been working with fully distributed teams since then. And so for me, there's no change. The change is that now there are more people working like this. So I had like less people working like this. But going back to Susie's comment about like not being trained, I think that's really crucial, because what we keep talking about is about location. I mean, everyone changed their location to home or wherever they are working from, but just kept the way that they work the same. And that's why we are experiencing most of the problems. I mean, like, meetings need to be the last resort, or, we should not be doing synchronous communication all the time throughout the day. So those are the reasons why we are experiencing the burnout. And to John's point, yes, the law is not there yet, but we have now solutions, interim solutions. We have employee of record companies now solving that tax problem. So you can just employ anyone across the globe through those companies. Or if you want to keep a contractor rather than an employer, which now the new way of talent management is going to, is just you can just like keep them as contractor. They can keep that on their side and resolve that issue by themselves, and being on the move all the time, where we have so many digital nomads just taking that path. So it's about being intentional, but it's about the change of the mindset as well. So with the last generation, or like anyone who has been in the workforce before the pandemic, there's this unlearning. So, and that until that unlearning is done, there cannot be a relearning about this new way of working. So it's about like, changing. It's like kind of like versioning the way that they have been working, not building something new, but like, versioning the way how they were working. And this is like fundamentally a new way of working. This is not a version of what has been in place.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think someone also just made a comment around that legal not keeping up with the tech. That's certainly, I think, a very good point. So with the, just following on from all of that, then with the recent there's a number of companies that are making return to work mandates. How do you see the future of remote work evolving, in the next 5 to 10 years? What will it be like in 2030, do you think?
I'll go.
Oh yeah, go.
My guess is that it's gonna continue, right? So I think a lot of times we as humans fight against things that we're not familiar with, and until it becomes familiar and that becomes the norm, and then someone else does something and that's not the norm, and then we fight through it until it becomes the norm. I think it's going to become the norm, right? Even when we think about some of the reports that have come out, I think it was it Forbes last year that had issued something about remote work, the stats and the trends, and even they were saying that, it's estimated that almost, I think, 22% of the American workforce, just speaking specifically about the American workforce, by 2025 would be working remote. I don't see that shifting, and I do think that's something that's going to apply across the board. And I think that what we're going to have to get to, as all things with life, is what is the balance, right? And if we are really thinking about how do we create balance and create opportunities for people, we're going to have to lean into that. What remote work has done is allowed people who may not have had the opportunity to work or engage in workforces before, whether it's physical limitations, or any other aspects. And I think that because of that, we are getting a tremendous value from an untapped market because of the ability to be able to hire people and have people work in different settings in different areas. Technology rarely keeps up in some ways, but I think bigger than tech is really laws, right? The laws usually lag. Even if we think about AI right now and all the things that people are concerned about, the laws are lagging. And, other thing that we have to consider is, are the people within the company educated? I would say that during that time, I was working at an organization who had no knowledge of the fact that telling people, work from wherever you want, that there was legal issues in terms of going to other countries. So I think education is going to have to be a big part of it, continually educating not only the employees, but the people who are responsible for ushering the employees through this. But I absolutely believe that remote work, we're not even going to call it remote work. It's just going to be work.
Yeah. Actually, can I chime in on that? Because actually, I think a couple of things. One is, as much as it's scary to do this, I think it's important for leaders to be upfront and admit, often, the vast majority that I've run into anyway, we're all making this up as we go along. We don't know what 2030 will look like. We can make guesses, and we might even be close to truth on some of them, but we are guessing because we don't know. So just kind of like letting people know that we're all making this up as we will go along is an important kind of, we're in this together. I think, if you go back and look at predictions of the future that were made in 1950 for what would life look like in 1960 or in the year 2000, they're like way off. So we don't know. We're all making it up. Two, COVID happened at an interesting time because it was also a workforce generational change time. So, 2016, millennials became the largest segment of the US workforce. 2021, Gen Z became the second largest segment of the US workforce. Mm-hmm. Those two make up now 57% of the US workforce. And they have a very different way of viewing what work is like. There's no such thing as a job for life. Why would I commute to a job? There are all these huge different things that have happened at the same time as COVID. So this is not only about COVID conversation. And I think, and Charmaine said something earlier that I think is really important, which is, for some people, the barrier of a commute was a real problem before COVID and is now actually getting better because hiring managers are willing to hire people who don't commute 5 days a week to an office. For the first time ever, Department of Labor is tracking an increase in the employment rate of people with mobility issues since COVID. Because hiring managers are willing to say, this is a location-independent job. Yes, I can hire for that. That person happens to have a mobility issue. Doesn't matter because they can work from. I think those are the kinds of things that are, you want to talk about a diversity impact game? That's right. Yeah. So we're not going back, and I don't think anyone really knows what it'll look like in 5 years' time or 6 years' time.
Probably not. But you bring up some
I want
good
to add on to that.
Yeah,
yes,
go for it.
I think it's the democratization of work, and I totally agree with what John is saying. It's just like we are democratizing, we're actually liberating the way that we work, so that people are not bounded with where they are by geography, or like, and this is for both sides, for both the employer and the employee. So why would an employer be bounded with only the talent within close proximity, or vice versa? Why would the talent be only working and looking for jobs in their own region? So this is totally liberating that. So it's going boundless with the work as well. And like, it is, the visa issues, or like, the mobility issues, finances. I mean, this is making things so much easier. And this is all skill based. I mean, if you're talented, why would a talent not be hired from across the globe, where they are just like having the same kind of skills, same level of expertise, same capabilities? So geography needs not to be the definer when for the hiring decision. So this new way of working, just, and in the future, is going to be more like across the globe as well. Now, even when we are talking about remote, for most companies, it's still within the same country, or like within the same region. But when we are just like looking at the fully distributed organizations, this is more relevant to what I have been saying. And this is like so much more liberating for the workforce.
Yeah, go Susie.
So yeah, I agree. It's fun. This is called social learning. When you learn from each other, you kind of keep on evolving your thoughts. So as I'm listening to everyone, I'm just thinking about this, that, like what just happened? Like, it's basically, we're at, COVID had this growth at all costs market, right? Where, you saw 1 or 2 people leave the organization, and it became like an employee empowerment era, right? Where, because people were, like, hey, we can work in different places, kind of what you're saying, Mina, right? And then, then now we're in this contracted kind of like economy, right? Like, it's contracted, it's not that easy to move around, et cetera, right? And the legacy of this is that, like, that, if you look at like Amex or something like that, that would have structured their organization and figured out which roles should be these remote and distributed roles. So they built for that. They had buildings, they had people that were remote, and they kind of figured that out. And that's why they were in those roles. Now we've moved into the, like, everybody went to this employee empowerment era, and we were forced to go home. So then everybody's like, well, I want to stay home. And like, the businesses are like, well, I already have buildings. And like, then we're in this, but none of it is really thoughtful. What was thoughtful was what Amex, did. They grew, they figured it out, they figured out what roles they needed. So I think what will happen is that, right now, this is just like a push-pull discussion. Like, ultimately, you have to think about what you need to get the work done by role, right? So new companies are going to do what Amex did. They're going to start at the beginning and be like, okay, like, I want to be fully remote. They'll set it up and it's fine. And we should get together on these sequences, because that makes sense to get your work done. So maybe we have a product week. All of product will come in for 1 week. I think what will happen is real estate will shift to kind of have more like availability of not just, like, when traditionally it'd be like you have a business and then you would go to a conference center, or you would go to like a meeting room scenario to go and get people together. But now they're going to figure out what's the blend they need and the interaction model they need. So then you're probably going to need more space that's like bigger gatherings, where you'd have like 100 people can come at a time, or whatever, or get full teams to come, and then not at all. So they don't want to own it, but they want to rent out constantly, like bigger spaces, or these mid-sized spaces. So anyways, that's what I think will happen. It will evolve. There's going to be this push and pull, because we have buildings and ways that we work. And then there's like, I don't want to go to work. Neither of those are right. If you had a business, then you would figure out what the right mix is, just like the older, the more established global players had.
Yeah, actually, can I riff on that? Like, I've been using phrases like location dependent versus location independent.
Okay.
And if the job is location dependent because you're taking passports off people coming off of an airplane, or you're operating a fire sprinkler system, or you're putting things on a shelf in a supermarket, or doing brain surgery in a hospital, that's a location dependent job.
Yes.
If your job, and that makes sense, and there you are. If your job is location independent, like looking at applications for passports online on a computer, or looking, then you should, all the other planning would then make sense. And also you can explain it to people. Why are you saying you need to be in this location? It's because this thing is location dependent. This part of your job is location dependent. And all of the scenarios that I see things go sideways is where people skip that conversation and just say, I want to see you in the office X days a week because I want to make sure you're not off on vacation. I'm like, oh, that's an attendance checking mechanism, and you can use that if you want, but actually you should probably have metrics and get into conversations around how do you know if people are working and what are people working on.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that, that being intentional a bit, that's important.
Yeah, I just to add, I've already probably taken too much airtime on this, but I'm just thinking about it like the other thing that's going on with all of the way that we're working now, and where people have just started automatically wanting to work more remotely or just in a different way. One of the demises, or I don't know, or maybe outcomes of like COVID was the decrease in employee motivation. So you have, I don't know, we could talk stats all day, but like lots of, like, probably on the good side, it's 1 in 2 employees are completely demotivated. Like I saw a McKinsey stat just earlier this year that said that they did a big study, and that, 40% of all employees are thinking of leaving their job in the next 3 to 6 months. Right. So I don't think anyone's shocked about that. But I think that, like, what do you do about that? Like, I also think this is a part of this remote piece, and also the COVID, just all these changes that were kind of like where we got into this correction mode. So I feel like what will happen next is companies are going to have to rethink how to build connection, right? Because I actually, Andreas, this someone I've met recently, he works a lot in this space, and he was explaining to me that, like, for example, I used to work at GE. We would be in training programs. Then I would meet people all over the world. And then if I needed something from like someone in whatever pole or country, probably some of a lot of people here, I would just know someone. I'd be like, hey, do you know what I could do about this? And they would kind of direct you, and you figure it out. But today what's happening is people start their remote. They only know their manager and maybe like 3 people. So like, it's just like you're working over here, and there's none of this like cross-pollination. So I think this is a piece through the remote work. Like, companies are going to be, I think the next phase will start to have to figure this piece out, because otherwise people are just going to continue to be very transactional and more transactional as they join, and they're floating out in virtual land or hybrid, right? And connecting with their leader, which may or may not go well, right? And then just go to the next one.
Totally.
All right. So
yeah, I was just going to say, just real quick, Rod, I think everything my peers have said here is spot on. I think what we're also going to see in the next years is what we saw in the pandemic. People were voting with their choices to stay or leave at organizations, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the power of the employee is more of, they don't like what they're seeing, they're going to go to somewhere else, right? And I think what Susie just mentioned is organizations are adapting. And it's like a pendulum, right? So it's, fully in the office, fully virtual. And I think there's something kind of in the middle that organizations are going to have to be intentional with. But it's also up to the employees as well. If that doesn't meet the needs of what you're looking for, then voting with your choice of where you work is eventually, does it shift the narrative, right? Does it make organizations, to your point, Susie, with American Express, I know Monique Herrera came out with that about a year and a half ago, in terms of, this is our plan and this is what we're doing. It was really big, right? In terms of, a huge organization such as the Blue Box to be able to go through that. So again, it's the voting with your choice, right? Is really going to try to drive, again, organizations to be intentional with their decisions about, are we okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I really, there's many good points. I really like the location dependent, independent point. I like the point around the increased pools of labor, and someone made a comment around, sometimes when you're looking for very specialist skills, you really need that increased pool. The points around inclusion as well. Plenty of good points there. So just moving on from there. So maintaining human connection. So despite working in distributed teams, how do we maintain that essential human connection when we're working remotely? What are some successful, unsuccessful sort of tactics that we can adopt? That's the next question.
I'll probably shoot just real quick. I think, what has worked well for me is, again, not, you can put one-on-ones on somebody's calendar, and that's great. But I think it's about making sure that you're connecting as much as possible. If you do have the opportunity to go into an office where, that team is, et cetera, is being being thoughtful. The thing that's always been told to me is your time is not your own when you're kind of, going into another location, utilizing that time, connecting with people, coffee, with, your stakeholders or your team, or, a quick lunch or something like that. That's kind of what I'm leveraging currently in terms of my current role. Is, again, my time is not my own. I'm trying to be as intentional as possible of making those connections. But again, like I said, I call people constantly throughout the day. I don't want it to be a one-on-one. It is, being available and making sure that, again, we're keeping those conversations going, et cetera.
Thanks, Richard.
Let me go next.
Yes.
And so I think like human touch, as Richard was saying, over communication never hurts. So I keep telling people to over communicate. Even during the pandemic, like all research surveys, it was, showing that the companies who were better off were the ones who over communicated. So have an internal communication channel, just keep communicating there, because like communication is touch, and human communication does not need that proximity. You can just like touch people. I have friends all over the globe that I can do. I mean, this is like, there's the fun story that I keep telling people. If I were to couch surf for 2 years in a row, I can find a couch all over the globe, because I have so many friends who are really close to me. And when we just like meet each other for the first time in person, it does not feel that we are seeing each other for the first time. It feels like, we have been friends for so long, because that connection, we are like here connected. So that human connection does not need the face-to-face interaction, because like, having that intentionality, being genuine about it, being sincerely, and like, caring about people sincerely, and just asking how they are doing, that's people understand that. People do see that. So it's about how they feel and how you make them feel. And if you make them feel that they're being cared for, that's what it matters.
Thank you. That was really interesting.
I'll chime in if I may.
Yeah, go.
It's about intentional human contact. In days of old, in the before times, when people would like hire a new person, drop them in at a desk in a cube farm and say, well, you can introduce yourself to the people around here and then walk off. And that sink or swim model sort of might have worked or might not have worked. And it could be just the luck of the draw where you're sitting in a desk that happened to be near a high visibility, high important people, or were you tucked away in the back corner next to the storage room and no one knew who you were and you just got forgotten about. Like those kind of scenarios happened. And so when you're physically distributed, you got to be very, very intentional, like obsessively intentional on the human contact. And so somebody else said it here earlier, but I want to flag, there's a whole session we could do just on synchronous versus asynchronous, like getting that right. I don't know who it was who said that, but whoever it was, that's spot on. Like, thank you. You gotta, the stuff that you can do asynchronously, do that. So then when you actually have human time, you can do the human stuff synchronously live and not waste it with other silly stuff. That's an operational management leadership step. And you gotta be obsessive there. And then down to details like structuring group gatherings once a quarter, like that kind of thing. Bringing people, if you happen to be passing through the same town, making sure that the people meet each other. Don't just like pass through town and don't say hi to the other people. There's all these small things you can do, but it's about the intentional human contact.
Yeah.
And Susie, muted.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Charmaine, were you going to say something? I thought I heard you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susie. I agree with the intentionality, and I will say that having worked in this way for most of my career before doing my own thing, I actually had better and stronger relationships with the people that weren't on site with me, because you take it for granted when you see people every day. And that intentionality was there. There was one job I worked at where, in the HR, I supported a large number of employees. Less than 5% of them were in the New York office where I was. So it really was about those phone calls. It really was about those IMs. It really was about that, Zoom time because we had no other choice. And those relationships to me were a lot deeper and richer because we appreciated when we did get to connect. So you're right about the intentionality, and I've seen the sink or swim model. And I think that happens whether it's a remote, distributed, or 100% in-person workplace. How does the organization prioritize getting people acclimated and adjusted to the company? There's many different things you can do. Yes, you can get together physically, but virtual hangouts can also happen, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Creating various opportunities for people to connect in ways that might resonate with them is really what it's all about. Even if you are having a virtual gathering, maybe some people are in person and people can see that, or whatever it is just about creating that space so people can participate, because not everyone wants to be in person, right? For example, I'm not I'm going to go to the bar with you after work person. I don't drink. And also being in HR, I didn't want to see certain things because I don't want to have to account for things. So I worked harder to have different relationships because that wasn't my form. But if someone said, hey, do you want to take a walk around the block and let's grab some tea? Absolutely. So I do think that we have to stop at all or nothing, because it really is about a blend, but the intentionality has to be there. And there are other things that someone could do. One company I worked at made it a point. Here are some random names. Reach out, connect, or just pairing people up, even if they're not in your department, because you do want to build those cross-functional relationships too, because maybe this person has a relationship with someone that's going to help you get through. So I think companies even have to think about who are the people when someone's onboarded or just reminded to make connections with, so that it's not just about those 3 people that you might work with directly. But absolutely.
Yeah. And 100% on that. And that used to always be like part of my best practice was like, here's 10 people you need to meet in your first like month of work or something. So I think just bringing those things back, like that's such a good practice and call out, Charmaine. And the other thing I would say is like, I coach a lot of, people in like right now, and just talking to them about, like things they're working through. And some, when you're remote and distributed team, sometimes when you have problems, you just tell yourself stories, right? Because you're just by yourself, like about so mad, you know what I mean? Like, let's say John said something to me by email, right? And then, you connect the dots with the next 3, like, whatever texts, IMs and emails back. And then I'm just like, he thinks I'm a horrible employee. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, did you like, what you could do is see them in person, right? Like cut through it. It's hard to tell yourself these stories. If you have the opportunity to see someone in person or to talk to them. Or the other thing that comes up a lot, I'm just like, well, people will be struggling. And because they do have these small circles of connection, I'm like, next time you go in, like to whatever site, like kind of like the time isn't your own, right, Richard? But it's also like, who should you meet with? Like, you shouldn't just meet with people when you're desperate to talk to them, right? Like this is relationship building. So like, meet with HR, right? And have a relationship with them, be like, Charmaine, know her, what she's doing, and like how you can help, and like kind of connect to build the culture, or, meet with your head of product, meet with your head of whatever area, right? And build those relationships like intentionally, but, and also like, especially if you have that opportunity to be on site. So those are like 2 top like challenges I see a lot of people have. Like they just, they feel very negative about certain things. And I'm just like, did you ask them?
Yeah.
Did you talk to them? Could you see them in person? Right. And it seems so basic when you hear it, but you're like, whatever, like you're used to just going on the bullet train 100 miles an hour, that this is where it's at. Right. So I just invite everyone to just, keep that in mind, that those are options. And it needs to be intentional, because everything else, you'll just get dragged through it.
Totally.
So I might just move.
I want to add one
All right,
thing,
yeah, no,
just a small thing
go.
from
All right.
a fully distributed team. There's one company that I am giving advisory. It's a US-based cloud consultancy company, Vertason. And one best practice that we have been doing is in the all hands, everyone presents about their country. So each month, a new country is being presented, so that everyone knows about the culture, about like what's okay, what's not okay, so that everyone's familiar with each other's culture codes and feels comfortable about those ways of communicating with those, because there are sometimes glitches in virtual communication across cultures, and we are not aware of those cultural differences. So it's a perfect way of embracing and becoming aware of those cultures. So I wanted to just like mention that as a good practice of a fully distributed team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just want to add one thing, like just listening to Mina, look for the Minas in your, like, if you are like working remote, you need someone like her that is happy, has ideas, can drive connection, right? Like this is like golden. And it's just like, you know, whether you're the leader of your team, like be a leader in your role, you know, and search out those people and get that happy energy. I'm always like, people ask me, who should I hire? I'm like, smart, happy, and humble all day long. Everything else kind of work out. But I do think like Mina, like listening to you talk, like I'm just like, yes, this is exactly it. You want her on your team, you know what I mean? Or, you know, looking for that in people, and they like that opportunity. And if you're social and you get your energy from that, it benefits. So anyways, good for you, Mina. That's awesome.
Yeah, +1.
Yeah. And I also like the thing that you mentioned earlier on this, Mina, which was around the just by meeting virtually, and when then you meet people in person. I like recently, like this week, I caught up with someone I hadn't seen since 2007, but we're Facebook friends, and so I've been connecting with him since then, and he's changed a lot, lost 20 kilo, looked all different. But when we met up, I just didn't, you know, just felt like we'd been together all that time. So yeah, it's quite very different the way that the world we live in today, I think. So just moving on just a little bit from this and trying to give some practical advice. How do technology and communication platforms then help shape this remote work experience, and what sort of things should people look for in selecting the right tools for their teams? Let's give that one a go.
Maybe
I can go.
Okay.
Because
Not me.
I'm not in favor of tools. Let me start with that. So I think because like when people are just like looking for tools, they think that they're like magic sticks and they're going to change everything overnight. And so that's why I'm saying I'm not in favor. Of course, I love using tools for productivity, for making things, you know, stay and keep sustainable. But it's not the tool. It's what you need. So maybe you don't need a tool, or maybe you have, with like I was working with one big company, and they're like a global company, and they did not know that they had those tools. So first they were just like asking me which tools we should purchase, which tools do you recommend? I say, let's look at what you have. And they did not even know that those tools existed. So we did like a tool assessment first, and then a needs assessment. And we just like matched up those needs with the tools that they already have. And if they needed more, then that comes later. So that's why when people ask me about the tools, then I ask them, do you need those tools? Like, what is your need at the moment that is not unmet, so that you are just like looking for a tool to, you know, take into your company? So I would be very careful with that. And when I'm just like doing my consultancy, I'm just like telling people, I am here so that you're not spending extra bucks, but I am here to save you bucks. So don't go for that as the first resort. Let that be saving, let that the purchasing additional tool be the last resort. So it's about like what you need, the need assessment, and identifying those gaps.
Maybe just kind of tagging on what Mina just said is tools are not always the answer, right? If you don't have the foundational aspect of relationships, and I'm seeing it in the comments, right, about relationships, it's about intentionality. We've said that a lot in the discussion as well. And I mentioned kind of in my point as well is what was great for me is moving from conference calls where, again, you can't see how people are reacting to your comments and kind of real time to, I mean, I'm only seeing this, right, in terms of Zoom or Teams. So you're not seeing, you know, somebody shifting a little bit, you know, in their seat, but you can see, right, how people are reacting to kind of the comments. And I've literally said it on calls. Are we good with that? Does that make sense? Because you're seeing kind of people shifting kind of their facial expressions. So again, I'm totally aligned with what Mina was saying is, it's not just the tools, it's about the foundational perspectives, right? Are we set up to appropriately leverage the tools? Are you going to utilize the tools to their fullest capabilities? The tools are not going to be the answer. It is you as an individual in terms of the relationships, et cetera. So that's, again, just my kind of perspective as well.
Oh, if I
Thanks,
may, and a quick one is, I don't think there is one answer because every organization does things different. And so just, again, being comfortable with the fact that we don't have a working crystal ball, like it's up to you as a leader to figure out what do you actually need, answer that question first, and then maybe you buy some new toys, that technology or whatever. Often you may already have it. I would also add to the logic that you should be explicitly looking at what do you need to turn off and unplug. Streamlining out stuff. I've seen environments where they set up a group chat product and some people like it, and then some other people don't, so they go get a second group chat product and a third, and you end up with these like different teams of people, different groups of people on different products. And I'm like, first of all, of course, nobody's talking to each other because they're all on different technologies. Like, you just created that problem. And by the way, you're spending money on doing that. Did you meet, so like turning things off is also a healthy way. But start with, why do you even want it? It's about the intentionality of human contact. And does the tool help or not for your organization?
Thanks, John. I think that's a really good point. And that happens so often. It's really key to just like one, be in the same place.
Yeah, I like that. That's such a good point, because it's those practical things. If half your team's on like Slack and the other half on, like Teams or something, and
for example,
in societies. So like, and I think on this, like, it is all about the relationships, and it's about time, right? Like, if you were to ask me like what really makes a really good team remotely and distributed team, it's you probably correlate how much time the leader puts into it, right? To how well it's going to come out, and the intentionality about like how you meet, and like, maybe like even onboarding like is another piece. Like if you want to have a tool or something actually become part of the organization, like there's an organization I was in when we built the onboarding, we actually had people practice using Basecamp. Okay. Like as adults going in, like even digital nomads, they came in and we're like, okay, send each other a note here. You know what I mean? Like, and it seems ridiculous, but then everyone uses it. They know how to do it. There's no embarrassment. There's no like questions, whatever. It makes it kind of fun. You're already connected to a couple people. So I don't know that that's necessary everywhere, but I'm just giving it as an example. Like at least like tell them like, these are the 4 ways we communicate, or we do not use email. Like some companies just don't use email anymore. Right? Like it's good to know if you're used to using email, because you'll be like, what the heck just happened? No one's talking to me. Right? So like, anyways, onboarding is a critical one. And just like your time as a leader, like I always put tons and tons of time talking to people. Like Charmaine, it sounded like you put a ton of time into those relationships. All of those people will remember you, and they were aligned to what you're doing because you did it. You they did like a priority, and probably above and beyond any other time you worked to do that. So that's what it takes. It's no magic wand, I don't think. Yeah.
These conversations go too quick. We've only got like 30 minutes left. Move us on. I could talk about it so much.
I would like to add one small thing to what Susie was saying about communication.
Yes.
I help companies come up with a communication urgency map. So defining what tasks are urgent and in what case they should be communicated from which tool, like whether it be the phone or like WhatsApp or Slack. So I strongly encourage companies to create that urgency map so that everyone knows when and through which tool that they need to communicate with each other.
Cool. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to change topics a little bit. Something that's really important to me is the importance of trust and autonomy, and then how does that apply in the remote work environment? How can they be fostered within a team to get the culture that supports a thriving remote teams? So trust and autonomy, what do we think about that?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just jump in. Similar to my peers here is, I know a lot of people say trust is earned, but I've also heard a lot of leaders, and I like this commentary, is that, you start with an A, what you do is it's up to you at the end of the day. I think I've also heard individuals kind of mention this perspective is, candidly for me, I don't care how many hours somebody's working. To me, it's kind of, the results at the end of the day. So that trust and the autonomy, we're all professionals, right? We've made it to a point in our career for a reason. So my view with my team has been, I'm not going to time track them. I'm not going to chase them in terms of, is their Teams or Zoom on green or red or yellow or, and candidly, I use kind of a little trick, and I know it kind of probably irks people quite a bit, is on my Teams, it shows I'm away, and I'm away for a reason. And it's because those that know me and those that engage with me know I'm available anytime, right? But it's also kind of, how do we kind of mitigate some of the unnecessary noise that's coming through from others as well? I literally got a comment, hey, do you know you're on, you haven't been online for a long period of time? Yes, I do know that. And that was intentional. But again, those that know me, those that I engage with, know that I can be reached at any point in time. So again, that's that trust, right? At the end of the day, is you start with an A, how you keep it is up to you. Are you going to abuse the system? Well, then again, that's kind of the answer for you at the end of the day. But again, I'm not a micromanager by any stretch of the imagination. I look at the output, not necessarily, were you online for 10 hours today? Don't care.
Yeah, I definitely think it's achievement over activity, and that we have to focus more on that, because people work differently, right? Based on just the way we're wired. There's some things that you might get that you can breeze through really quickly because you love it. If you told me, yes, I do work, but if you told me, oh, go do an interior design project, I do that in a heartbeat, right? I do that. I love that stuff. But something else, if you told me now go make a 9-course meal, I'm going to painfully approach that process, right? So I think it really depends. And we have to also recognize if someone is a 4 in an area, they're not going to be a 10. So we also have to practice grace. And we don't do that enough. And Richard, I'm with you. I have done that. Alerts are off. I'm away because I don't want the dings all the time. But I really think the biggest issue with all of this, when we think about the trust and everything, is what does accountability look like? Because if you're in an organization that accountability looks differently for everyone, you've lost the trust. So if we say this is our expectation, but Jane and Jack and Jill get to do one thing, and that's fine. But if somebody else does that, there's some type of reprimand or potential loss of job, or you've lost it. So if organizations, and I tell leaders this all the time, if what you say you're not willing to equally apply to everyone, don't say it.
Oh, well, +1 to all of that. This whole like trust and autonomy and stuff. There's delegation of authority, like delegation to people. That's a thing that people have been talking about for decades. Like, how do you safely delegate work to people and know that it'll get done and trust them to do the thing? That's a conversation that's been going on. It's a management issue that's been going on for decades, long before COVID. So I just want to reality check. It's not a new thing. What's different here is that you can't actually see if someone's sitting, typing, or turning. And that's where it gets weird, because I always joke about MBA being management by attendance or management by walking around. It's like, I can see that Richard is sitting at his desk and he's typing really fast, therefore he must be working, but he's tilted the screen over so I can't see what's on it. He's got a little privacy thing on it, and actually he's on like shopping online, or he's doing some sort of gambling game on Bitcoin or whatever, or he might be working, but all I really can tell is that he's present. And that's not actually productivity. And in environments where that's how you manage, that's where people start putting in keyboard tracking systems and looking at red, yellow, green. That's you're just doing attendance checking. It's about productivity gets weird, because that's when it turns out that a lot of organizations don't actually have clear metrics that matter. What are you doing? Why are you here? Why is this team here? Did we work on the right things today? And that's actually that's again, it's a leadership thing. But if the team doesn't have a clear idea of what they're all working on together, that's a problem. And I will also just note, it's not so much, we talk here about individual metrics. I want to add, there's also team metrics. And I think team metrics are really important for bringing the team together, because then it gives John and Charmaine and Susie a reason to keep talking to each other. Susie's busy today, so John and Charmaine will pitch in a bit extra to help on the thing, because the three of us are all trying to make that team metric better. That also brings us together as humans, even though we're physically apart. So that's the metrics that matter for the team. Susie.
That's
I see
really,
your hand up.
really interesting, John. And I'm just wondering, has anyone else got anything else to add on team metrics or metrics of individuals?
I have just like I think like I'm aligned with everyone, like in terms of like making it intentional, etc. The only one thing I wanted to add that is a good one for building trust is feedback. Now, the art of feedback is like, I would say it's the number one career accelerator, your ability to take feedback, right? But also we need managers to be able to give feedback. So if you want to build trust in an organization, like, yes, like have all the goals and like everything, I think you guys like completed that picture. But I think it's the next level. You kill trust, depending on how you give feedback, right? And I actually went to, I usually don't go to like sessions during the day, but I did. Yesterday I went to this one and it was amazing. I will post it somewhere afterwards, but like it was about basically the developing mind, like from like, kind of 10 to 25 years old and how your brain is developing and how new hires, like how they take feedback. And the example that they gave was, if you're like, I think like a lawyer, for example, imagine a lawyer that like charges $1,000 an hour, right? And they have somebody articling, and the person articling did like, whatever bunch of things that could have been done better. They're just learning, right? And then the lawyer is thinking, I'm taking my time. I make $1,000 an hour and give you all of this feedback of like a hit by hit of like what you're doing incorrectly so you can correct it. And then what they're saying is like, because of the way your mind develops, like you're looking for social acceptance. So, and I think this is true of any age. Like I was like, this is kind of probably everyone, right? So all they're hearing is this person is yelling at me and saying I suck, and they're thinking of firing me when I want to become a lawyer, right? So like, actually this one person thought they were doing this big service and being generous with their time. Don't you understand? Right. And then the other person is thinking like, you're scolding me and I suck and I'm never going to get to my goal. Right. So the way you do feedback, right. And like how you actually just set context. And I think this is like so important in terms of like remote leadership in general. The context setting is the key. So in all these communications. So anyways, I don't want to monopolize. We have 4 minutes left, but that is, I think, a really big one to look into and to master and continue to work on.
Yep. Thanks, Susie. And yeah, 4 minutes left, not very much time. And I thought the last question, if we just maybe add 1 point each of us, is around avoiding burnout. So what's one key thing that you adopt or that you recommend around avoiding burnout, where the lines between work and home are really quite blurred? What would be 1 point each person?
Okay, time minute going. Structure your day.
5 minutes going.
Yeah, so fake commute. Intentionally leave your house. Go take a walk. It's good for you anyway. Go do whatever. I mean, do a walk or whatever you want to do. Like I knew someone who drove away and used to commute for an hour. So they drove 30 minutes away and then drove 30 minutes back home again. You can do things like that. But creating that structure at the beginning and the end of the day, I think is a really important way to help that. And for me personally, like dress appropriately. So I dress like, shirt and for work. And on weekends, it's t-shirts. Right. And that's a mental flip for me. It's like, I'm not working today because I'm in a t-shirt, and that helps you separate out your home life and work life. And then the other one about the metrics and intentionality, that comes back up again here, because now you can see I don't need to be working at 10 o'clock at night because we already knocked off the things we need to get done. I can come back to it tomorrow. That's it. I'll pick.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Just say, give yourself grace. Right? We're giving everybody else grace. You have to give yourself grace as well, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Rick.
I'd add boundaries. All boundaries mean is access. Who has access to you when, and you have to put them. But in order to put boundaries in place, you have to know what you need, and then you have to be willing to communicate what those boundaries are and stick to them. There's no point in setting a boundary that you won't stick to.
Good.
Yeah, I feel like those are all really good pieces of advice. I'm not good at like managing my like work. Like I'll work all the time. So I would say that like if you do work a lot and you have a lot of stuff going on, make sure you have momentum. This is one of the things I've been learning about this year is that, it's not going to be the work that kills me, maybe, like physically, but but like my soul will be killed by not having momentum. So if you're doing something, working hard, like make sure you really feel like you're making momentum, like whether it's personal or, in the workplace.
Thank you.
So for individuals, take regular breaks, plan your day, have your metrics. And for the companies, have a remote work policy and create it with your own people. I saw some questions about with so many details. I mean, let that be in your remote policy so that everyone on their first day knows about everything and they're all aligned around those policies.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for the chats as well. Thanks to the panelists. It's been a really enlightening session. It's been quite amazing. And, we covered a lot of topics: building remote teams, future of work, human communication, role of technology, culture trust, blurred lines, a lot of stuff. So yeah, thanks everyone. And I really look forward to catching up with you on future panels. So thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for a great job, Rod.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Now
Thank
you
you,
can go
Rod.
sleep, Rod. Good night.
Okay,
Nice.
thanks.
Drop.
Thank you.
Bye.